The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth alongside Phil Duvall. Say hi, Phil.
Say hello, Andy. Say hello to my little zit on my forehead. It's look like a 13-year-old boy. I'm really excited, except for the whole beard and bald part.
It's a weird 13-year-old boy. I mean, that would be a weird.
I go back and
boy.
forth on this because on one hand, like, I remember being like a teenager and being like, when does like acne and constant zit things stop?
Sure.
Like, it has to stop.
Right.
And now I'm 35, looking back, going like, how do I still have these?
Right.
On the other hand, it is markedly better than it was when I was a teenager.
Is there
markedly better.
Is there a question there? Are you looking for me just to comment or what?
Oh, here's the deal, Andy. I've been talking for a long time in my life. If there was a question, I'd have put a question mark in it. You didn't know. You didn't know. I'm just making a comment, throwing it out there. Is this the first time we've done a show? You don't know how we do this now?
Nice.
I say some clever stuff, then you say some clever stuff.
It's like
Andy, go now.
It's like the stereotypical like courtroom drama. Like, all right, counselor, yeah, I'll give you some leeway, but you better get somewhere fast. Right?
You better get fast.
Was there a question in there, counselor? Okay, so I would go further, and I would say there's literally not a thing about my life that isn't markedly better than it was when I was 13.
Oh yeah,
like not one, one. And you know what? I was okay at 13. Like, that's not like I wasn't like, you know.
13 was bad for me. But being a teenager was tough. I had a tough, and it was the circumstances of my life and my family, coupled with, but I like who I was when I was 13. Like, sure. I think about teenage me, like, that's a good kid. Like, yeah. He could have been better.
Right.
But I mean, so could I now.
That's right. Yeah, but he could have been better because he could have been you now, but back then, right?
In some ways, I feel like I was more, I was more, I think I was more than I am now. Like, I think I was more of everything. Like, I was all more of everything. I'm a little bit more, like, I think I was a little bit more stalwart and a little bit more idealistic and a little bit more, like, rigid. And I respect that about 13-year-old me. Like, I mean,
that's fine.
I was not a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old for that matter who was going to twist with the times, as it were.
I mean, okay. You know what? I'm depending on how you define stalwart, in terms of real world application, I'm fine with you being a little less of all of those things. I'm a little less of all of those things, and I'm a better person for it.
And here's the thing. Agreed. Me too. I'm just saying I don't look back in anger. I look back with it, like, kind of like, I was a good kid. Like, he was doing his best. Heart on his sleeve, that kid.
Sure.
Heart on his...
Yeah.
And, like, on one hand, I think, like, what would, like, 13-year-old me think of 35-year-old me?
Yeah.
And on one hand, I'm like, huh. And on the other hand, I'm like, well, that's where the train gets. That's where I get off the train. Because then I'm like, I don't care what 13-year-olds think about anything now. So really, why would I care just 'cause it's me? Like, when I was 13.
13-year-old me would love the crap out of 36-year-old me. I mean, just love the crap out of me. I mean,
did you ever see that Bruce Willis movie, The Kid?
No, I did not.
I really want to. I still haven't either.
Do you?
Yeah, no, I do. Honestly, I do because I love I have always loved. When I was a teenager and I was having a really hard time, one of my fantasies, so depressing, but it's totally true, because only I could fantasize about myself. One of my fantasies was that grown-up me could somehow make a connection with teenage me and just tell me, dude, it's
going to be okay.
Hang on, man.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
That never happened, as far as I know. If he did, he was very Back to the Future about it and didn't let me know it was him.
Right. Right. Didn't this used to be Two Pines Mall? Yeah. No, I get it. I think I don't think I mean it's a little specific, but I don't think it's that your fantasy there is that unusual. I think it's inherent in every, 18 again, 13 going on 30, all of these things. It's not specifically older version of person and younger version of person meet up and one of them looks like Bruce Willis. But I think Hot Tub Time Machine, for crying out loud. So,
I cannot wait to see the second one, by the way.
Cannot.
I'm now in full let's see this movie now.
Cannot wait. There's a moment.
Craig Robinson is a secret weapon.
The latest trailer I saw has what's her name? Gillian Welch, Britta from Community.
Gillian Jacobs.
Right. Gillian Welch is a songwriter, maybe?
Gillian Welch is my basically my favorite living songwriter.
That is why I knew that name. That is literally the only reason I knew that name. Not a music guy. But she is apparently dating Adam Scott's character, and there's a scene in the new trailer that I just saw where she's laughing. She's like, "You guys," they're just like standing there, like all of them are standing there, and she goes, "You guys are gonna make me shoot milk out of my nose," and everyone's like, and she goes, "I drank milk earlier," and it cuts to Greg Robinson, and he goes, "What?" And it is so perfect. And I was like, it's sublime. Check out that trailer. You will love it.
Okay. I'm going to segue. Are you ready for the segue?
You know what? This is going to be the smoothest segue ever. Hit me with it, boss.
It is. Okay. Yeah. Well, no, I like us talking about, not so much Hot Tub Time Machine, but us talking about our younger selves and our less nuanced, uncomplicated selves in their full-bore reality. Because today we're going to talk about a little movie called American Sniper. Mm-hmm. And, it's funny, this movie is now, it's honestly, it's and I mispronounce this word often, but this is some serious zeitgeist, this movie, which I was not expecting. And not all of it positive, and that's fine. That's part of the whole deal with zeitgeist. But I feel like 13-year-old me would have loved this movie.
Okay.
And for different reasons than 35-year-old me loved this movie. And I will actually say, I don't know if I loved this movie, but I will say, because I think there was a lot wrong with it, and because I never want to see it again. So that's probably why I didn't love it.
Sure.
But I think it's a movie that, I think it's a movie that deserves to be paid attention to, and I think it's a movie that deserves discussion. Mm-hmm. And I'm concerned that the majority of the discussion about this movie is either liked it, didn't like it, which is just basic. That's not even really movie conversation. That's just.
And yet it is the movie conversation that dominates all other conversation for every movie. But your point is well taken.
Liked it, didn't like it. Liked it, didn't like it.
Yeah.
Or, why do you hate America? Or why do you hate nuance? There's this weird dynamic fight that's happening around and about this movie. It's also being turned into a conservative versus liberal conversation, which I just don't get. I mean, having seen the movie, I don't get it. I haven't read a lot of that stuff because I don't read a lot of that stuff.
Right.
But I left the movie. I left American Sniper, and then let me say this, and then I'll hand it over to you. I left that movie profoundly moved, upset. I cried on the way out of the theater, and then I cried 4 more times that day on random occasions. Once during a commercial.
For it, or just a random commercial thinking about it?
No. Like a commercial of a person doing something. I mean, the toast turned out okay, and I started crying. I mean, it was.
Sure.
It shook me up in that way, and it left me thinking. It had my brain working, really working.
Sure.
And so on. So I guess I just want to say, this is a movie that made me think a whole lot, and made me. And so I just want to. Because we have a movie podcast, you and I.
Do we?
I want to.
Meta humor. Okay.
I want to give the movie credit where credit's due.
Sure.
Because I want to, and the way that I would want to give it credit is not by calling it one of the great films of the year, calling it a masterpiece, or saying best of or worst of, or any of that. We can talk about some of the successes and some of the failures of the movie, and I know that we will.
Yeah.
To me, the best credit, the best tribute that I can pay this movie, honestly, is to just make sure you and I have a conversation about it, because I think it merits that.
Yes.
And that's kind of, and I will say, and not all the movies we watch, or even all the movies we talk about, merit the in-depth conversation.
Attack Force Zero.
Attack Force Z. Attack Force Z.
Z. Oh, I'm sorry. Well,
No, but still. That's a clear.
Yeah.
That's a ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
So back to you.
So here's the first thing I want to say, and as I say it, I'm not saying that we can't talk about this, but here is the aspect. Okay, this is a loaded word. All right, I mean this with no innuendo attached. All right, and it's important that I say that. Okay, the level on which this movie works or doesn't work, to whatever degree, that I am totally uninterested by the conversation, and yet I will have the conversation with you because I think it will lead to more interesting things, is on the level of propaganda. I don't care. Now, that is not to say that's the level where Clint Eastwood...
You don't care what? I'm confused. You don't care what?
What you were saying about, like, both liberals and conservatives are using this to, like, lob grenades over the wall at each other. And, oh, he was a racist. Oh, you're unpatriotic. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, like, I couldn't be less interested in that conversation. I'm only interested in it to this degree. It is so clearly, to me, not a propagandistic movie. It is so clearly not propaganda that I'm interested in the reality of what it actually is. So I'm only interested in the propaganda conversation to the degree that you and I can say out loud, this movie is not propaganda. Yeah. And
people on either side of the fence who think it is, both are equally dumb. Conservatives and liberals are being dumb if they think this movie is propaganda.
Yes.
And I'll even go. And what's really interesting is, it's very possible that Chris Kyle, who wrote the book about himself, I haven't read the book. It's very possible that the book is propaganda.
Sure.
It's very possible that he was thinking propagandistically, and if his real life human personality is anything like the excellent career-defining performance of Bradley Cooper, and the character that Bradley Cooper enfleshes and brings to the screen in a real fantastic way, highlight of the film.
Oh, no question.
If he's anything like that in real life, then I could see him thinking that this propaganda was propaganda, his book, and that it would be necessary because it would help, because the character of Chris Kyle, I don't know the real person, the character as portrayed on screen, thinks propagandistically, thinks in those sort of broad swaths. That scene early on in the movie, and by the way, folks, spoilers all day long, we're talking about the movie as if everyone here has seen it. That scene early on, so turn this off and go see the movie. Because
and judging by the box office receipts, you have. So.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. This is the first hit we've talked about in a while.
That's true.
The last show we talked about a 10-year-old horror movie from South Korea, so
it's what we do.
That early on scene where they're at the kitchen table in Texas and Dad with his two kids is like, someone else may start a fight, but you're gonna end it.
Yep.
Like this real sort of do you understand?
Yeah.
And right, I mean, it's so on the nose, so broad, but the idea, and I'll get into that in a second if you want, but the idea is it's creating a character that thinks in black and white.
Yeah. Yes.
And thinks on the nose and thinks with the broad brush and acts and lives that way. And I believe that it shows the beauty and the poetry of that, and also the tragic complexity of that and the impossibility of maintaining a real existence that way.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's all built into that. So right out of the gates, we're not going to sit around talking about how this movie is or isn't propaganda. I don't think. I think both of us are just like, it's not.
And even, frankly, I will go just a tiny step further and say, if it were, I'd still be fairly uninterested in it. I just, like...
The only thing I would say is, if this movie were, it's not. And here's why it's not. If this movie is anything, it's anti-war.
True.
And,
that's true.
And it's very, in my opinion, very, and I'm saying this as someone, and I love it because it's done by Clint Eastwood, who is an American citizen, an American icon, telling the story of another American icon. If anything, it's very critical of American policy.
Yeah.
And American, I'm not saying policy, of like the American ethos of its place in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what's interesting. But I don't think it's propaganda, because even in that direction, I think it's just that's what the story's telling.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I would love... Okay, so I got to start... This is how I am... I got to say this, because this is how I'm coming at this conversation. Right?
Talk to me.
I loved 80 to 85% of this movie.
Right.
And I disliked the remaining 15 to 20 enough that I don't think I can... I only liked the movie. Like, I just...
Fair. Yeah.
I think it's like the stuff with him at home, or no, not the stuff with him at home. The stuff at home that doesn't involve him.
Oh God.
Like it's all B-roll. It's all the assistant director. You know, it's all second unit stuff. Because the brilliance of the stuff that I love, and I think it's just what you said. It is quite a trick. It is quite a trick to make a movie that is nothing but gray, where everything is through the lens of a guy who sees in nothing but black and white.
Beautifully said, Andy.
And none of that, as good a job as Sienna Miller does, and I think, this was her best performance that I've ever seen her give. None of that. I feel like she is totally let down by so much of what she has to do.
So I'm a little bit in love with Sienna Miller. She came to my consciousness in 2002 or 2003.
Okay.
As the lead female in a show called Keen Eddie on Fox, which lasted one season.
Okay.
And which I loved unabashedly and to no end, and on a level that I can't really describe reasonably.
Sweet.
It was all the things that Phil wants. Even transitioning into third person to talk about himself.
Nice.
All the things that Phil wants in a television show, which is not mean it was a great show, by the way, even a little bit.
Sure.
But God, I loved it. I love the main actor. I consistently forget his name, but he went on to be on The Practice, and then he was started in his own show, which I've already forgotten the name of, but our friend Kalinda wrote for it a little while. And I was on another show that I loved with Chi McBride and Danny
Human
Masterson.
Target.
Human Target. So the main guy from Human Target.
Show. I love that show.
Oh God, I love Human Target. Loved it. I love that actor.
Sure.
I think it's anyway. I
Mark
met
something?
him outside. Yeah, it's Mark something. I met him outside the Pizza Hut in Venice Beach when I was living there, and it was right after his show had been canceled. But anyway, so Sienna Miller was the lead female on that show.
Mark Valley.
And
Mark Valley.
Yeah, he's a lovely man, and I believe an American veteran. And he was very kind to me when I met him outside the Pizza Hut, because I did walk up to him and say, I love your show, Keen Eddie. Is it gone forever? And he's like, it is. And I was like, I'm really sorry, because it was really good, said 22-year-old me to this guy in the Pizza Hut parking lot. I was on my way into the El Pollo Loco, by the way. It was next door. I don't get Pizza Hut. They serve Pepsi. So I said to him. So I says to him. I says, I'm sorry, your show's ending.
He says to him.
He says, it's okay. He says, it's okay. Look out for me on The Practice. Or no, it was like a spin-off of The Practice that was coming out.
Boston Legal or whatever.
Something, and he was on that, and then I never watched him on that either.
Nice. You've got to see. We're interrupting this to tell you, like, walk away from this podcast and watch the movie Layer Cake. What is the matter with you?
I've never seen that movie.
I know.
Oh, you want me to walk away right now?
Yes.
Andy, I'm not going to.
But at your earliest convenience, she's the female lead in it.
Emotionally, I've already left.
Nice.
Emotionally, I'm already queuing this up on the Netflix or whatever it's going to be on.
Nice. I like it.
I just developed. I mean, I just think she's, and it's so unfortunate that this is the way that straight men think in terms of our priorities. I just had such a huge crush on her. I just think she's adorable. But she's also just good. She is a good actor, like, unquestionably. But I don't feel like she's ever been given, like...
Yeah.
She hasn't been given an opportunity that I've seen to really kill it.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she got the opportunity and I never...
opportunity that, say, Jennifer Lawrence has. No, to say nothing of... I'm not speaking of their relative talent level.
No one here is disparaging Jennifer Lawrence. Do not worry, America.
Indeed. And by the way, most of America, I loved her in Winter's Bone, so I hipster loved her before you did. Boom.
I believe that.
I know you do. I know you do.
Okay, here's the deal. My point is, she does a fine job. You can't detect her British accent, and she plays an actual human being to the degree she's allowed to. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing.
Well said.
It's amazing to me how little Clint Eastwood seemed to care about these scenes.
Yes.
Now that gets, and it affects the movie, of course, and it affects a lot of things, including. But I want to say something, and this is you're gonna laugh at me.
It's possible.
Actually, you and I always agree on these weird things, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
This is an audacious. I'm going to make an audacious claim.
Audace away.
Two-time Academy Award winner, two-time Academy Award-winning Best Director Clint Eastwood is an underrated director. That's my audacious claim. And the reason I say it is I don't think critics take his movies seriously. I think Unforgiven was the last movie they took seriously. A lot of them don't even take $1 Million Baby seriously. Like, I feel like he has the capacity. I think he's a masterful storyteller who doesn't always make a great movie. But whenever it's not great, they just sort of he doesn't get the level of respect that some of our great directors get. And I can't help but think it's because he wasn't part of that sort of 70s avant-garde. He wasn't part of when Scorsese and Woody Allen were coming up doing what they were doing. He was being the High Plains Drifter and the Outlaw Josie Wales, and so he's not necessarily flashy. He's not necessarily he's never defined a genre with his directing so much as he did with his acting.
Are both of those did Josie Wales and High Plains Drifter? He directed both of those as well. Yes,
he may have. I think he directed Josie Wales. I think it was his first movie that he directed.
Okay.
Which is a beautiful movie, but he wasn't. But one of my favorites, in fact. But it wasn't like groundbreaking cinema by the way people find that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think people are quick to dismiss him, even in the midst of it. And when he does well, I sort of feel like a lot of our esteemed TV or writers of film critique, like, are quick to just sort of be like, oh, like almost like. I feel like they think, like, even a blind squirrel finds a nut now and again. Like, I feel like that's kind of how people talk about Eastwood.
Yeah.
I'm sure politics are a part of it. I'm sure ageism is a part of it.
Yep.
And that's fine. I'm not, whatever. But I want to say about this movie that the things that he does bad are egregiously bad.
Yeah.
The baby doll, the instead of a real baby having a baby doll.
Yeah.
The terrible pregnant belly that looked like I made it with paper mache at home. Like, shame on whoever made that pregnant belly.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
don't say, well, like, you don't know. My wife has been pregnant twice. I know what pregnant belly looks like. It does not look like a paper mache that I made at home. It looks like my wife has a child inside of her stomach. That's what it looks like.
Sure.
And the cloying sort of like refusal to give Sienna Miller humanity and things like that, like it's problematic. And like the very basic, like, oh, he's at the bar, like, of course he is. I did love in the sense that buy into the backyard barbecue scene, and I bought into that.
Sure.
And I bought into driving in the sort of paranoid. I feel like anytime the camera's on Bradley Cooper, I feel like Eastwood knows what he's doing. And I feel like anytime it's not on him, Eastwood loses some sort of aim in terms of the storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
But what I want to say is the stuff that he does right in this movie doesn't overcome the stuff that he does wrong, because it really feels unprofessional even on some level.
Yeah.
The stuff he does wrong.
Agreed.
But the stuff that he does right is so right that I just want to be like, can we stop and acknowledge what he's like? Can we acknowledge that?
Yeah.
And the only other thing I can say, and then I'll shut up for a second, is I watched most of Hook today.
Okay.
Okay? Hook is not one of Steven Spielberg's best movies.
Diplomatically stated.
But Hook has a lot to be said for it.
Mm-hmm.
It is certainly a movie that where the whole does not add up to the sum of its parts. And it is a movie that is broken in a lot of weird ways,
Mm-hmm.
and has a lot of things that work. That being said, it created a world, a live-action Neverland, that as a 12-year-old boy, I was 12 when that came out.
Yeah.
I was not a dumb 12-year-old.
Right.
It worked in a lot of very interesting ways.
Yeah.
It's really beautifully cast and has some really great performances, and it's a total mess. But it's got heart for miles, and there are pieces of it that work so well
Mm-hmm.
that you're like, oh, Hook, that movie was a disappointment. It's like...
Okay, maybe, but come on.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
but there's a whole generation of us that it did something for, and we weren't on drugs at the time,
Right.
at least not the first time we saw it. So let's look at what it brings to the
Yeah.
table.
Yep.
And so I guess I want to say, like, let's look at what Clint Eastwood brings to the table with American Sniper, because it's worthy.
Agreed. Well said. Okay, there's a lot there. Most
I know I talked.
importantly, see layer cake. Okay, moving on.
I'm going to write it down.
Write that down. Write it down. Ugh. Okay. I wonder, and I just thought this as you were saying it. I love it. I wonder if part of the reason, because I totally agree with you, he is an underrated director. He is and underrated not only in general, but specifically as to his directing contemporaries.
Yeah.
Also, he directed both of those movies, both Outlaw Josie Wales and High Plains Drifter. And I think maybe his first directorial effort, I could be wrong about this, Play Misty for Me.
I think that's correct.
Which is awesome because you get to see Grandma Bluth be totally insane. And
I've never seen it.
It doesn't have it's a fairly by the numbers thriller, but Jessica Walters just is crazy, and Clint Eastwood is Clint Eastwood. I think maybe, and I'm curious. I'm curious to know your take on this, although there is no answer for it, or not one that we will be able to arrive at. Maybe the reason he is underrated as to his directing contemporaries, such as the ones you mentioned, Scorsese, Spielberg, Coppola,
Alan.
Yes, thank you. That was the other one you mentioned, Alan. Well, so interestingly, Alan breaks my argument down a bit, but they both they both played a type. Scorsese wasn't in his movies. Coppola wasn't in his movies. Spielberg wasn't in his movies. Eastwood and Allen were. And, you know, I mean, they certainly both played a type. They both also gave more nuanced performances as actors than certainly in that era than they were, I think, given credit for. I'm thinking specifically of Allen. I think his Alvy Singer is very different from I forget his character in Manhattan, but it's too easy to call them like yeah. It's too easy. It's too easy to say, oh well, they're both nebbishy Jewish guys. Well, okay, right. But I think they're very, very different, and I think that, you know, Dirty Harry is not Josie Wales, is not the High Plains Drifter, is not the Man with No Name, and I get that, but I wonder if because even the stuff that is weirder, and I'm thinking specifically of things like High Plains Drifter, which is a weird movie. Like when you get right down to it, there's a lot in that. It's a Western, but that's a weird freaking Western. Yeah. I wonder if it's because from the jump, Eastwood, both as an actor and then later as a director, was more populist, really, than any of those other directors that you mentioned. I mean... And I would go further and say, Andy, think about this, and this is where he is totally distinct and separate from Woody Allen, is he doesn't fall into the classic auteur mentality. Yes. That's a better way of saying
primarily a director and a producer.
Yes. You know, and
even though he writes a lot of the music for his own stuff, and I mean, literally composes scores for his own movies, but he picks projects. This was a project, right. By the way, American Sniper was a project that Steven Spielberg was going to do.
Right.
Bradley Cooper bought it, bought the book rights, and decided to try to went to Warner Brothers, and they tried to get Spielberg, and Spielberg started to say yes, and then backed out, and then they were like, let's see if Clint will do it, and Clint was like, I'll do it.
I'll say this. I would have loved, no judgment on which would have been better because that's stupid. I'd love to see Spielberg's American Sniper. I really would. I think it'd be a weird movie.
I'm still. No one will make gambles like this. I still want to see something like 2 or 3 different directors make essentially the same movie at the same time with the same cast, or near the same time with the same cast, and then let them do it in a vacuum. Don't let them see what the other one's doing, and then just put it out and see what we got.
Yeah. Well, they do it. It's called film school. But yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But agreed. So I think, and okay. So the next thing, just an interesting thought experiment, is that sort of, well, he started out in spaghetti westerns, which are now, you know, Sergio Leone now is, I mean, he is the grandfather and godfather of so much cinema, not just westerns, that has come after him. But at the time, you know, even if critics were like, oh yeah, these movies are really great, they weren't hailed necessarily as the masterpieces that they were and are the way they are now. Yeah. And I wonder if, you know, that's how he started, and you know, stuff like you know, Cat Ballou and you know, things you know, I wonder if he could never really escape that, and that followed him into
like
his
Ron Howard.
Directing.
It's just like Ron Howard.
Sure.
It's just like, I mean, it's the same. They have very similar issues in that sense, and it, you know, having their public perception of what they are being. But what is interesting to me is that I can't think of a filmmaker who has been more, who has chosen to tell more, to tell more subversive stories on a regular basis under the guise of like sort of basic meat and potatoes American filmmaking,
populist entertainment. Like
the other guys the other guys aren't subversive; they're just straight up countercultural.
Sure,
but like he's like subversive. Like he's like so. And here's what, and this is what interests me most about American Sniper. I believe the humanity of Chris Kyle, the Chris Kyle character, is on full display for better and for worse. But I want to say that this is an American. Clint Eastwood is an American, known as an old school patriot, and known as someone who, while actually not registering Republican, has been known to vote Republican into what's that word where they, you know.
He stumps for Republicans. He
stumps for Republicans,
endorses,
right, and all that, and all that. Endorse. That's the word. Endorse Republican candidates. This is a movie that is so, to me, under the guise of telling an American war story about an American war hero, is so deeply subversive in the sense of how critical it is of American mentality of its place in the world. This is a movie that is about the fact that we all think, Americans, many of us, myself definitely included, if I'm not, like, what is Chris Kyle's famous line in the movie? And every time I talk about Chris Kyle, I'm talking about the character. I'm not talking about the real life persona or what's in the book or any of that. I'm just talking about what I saw on the screen.
Yeah.
It's not about how many people I killed. It's about how many people I was not able to save.
Right.
How effing American is that? Like, that is how we think. Like, whenever something, late 20th, or second half of 20th century and early 21st century American, it's not forever, but like in the last 70 years, if something happens in the world, one of the first questions Americans ask is, what's America going to do about this?
Right. What are we going to do about it? Yeah. Yeah. It's very much like a home team kind of feeling. Like, you know,
yes. We think we're the home team for planet Earth, Andy. Like, we do. We think we're the home team for planet Earth. Right. We think that we're not just defending ourselves. We're defending freedom, which is not just our freedom, which is our. And the thing is, I have a friend who's an Irishman, and I've been trying to get him to listen to our show. He's a beautiful man and a great Christian and a good thinker. And because he's Irish and not American, he likes to, as they say, take the piss out of Americans a lot, sure, even though he totally loves America. Every time he shows up, he's like, "Oh my God, it's great, but you guys are such jerks about it. But it's so great." I'm like, "I'm sorry," but I'm like, he's like, I made some comment about like America saving the world, in World War II, and he's like, "You guys always go to that," and I'm like, "Yeah, because it happened, and then we were taught about it. Like, you don't understand. All of us were raised.
Yeah,
all of us were raised, being taught that America saved the world.
Yeah,
like." And now there's possibility. I mean, there's so many. The problem is there's no nuance in that statement.
Right.
And we're living in the aftermath of a people being raised with propaganda, whether it's true or not.
Sure.
And this movie says to me, this is what you get. This is what you get.
Right.
And I'm not going to excuse the bad filmmaking in terms of the home thing, but you know what? Like, even that, like, let's get meta for a second and say, even that, like, of course that stuff is treated like that. That's the way we treat it. The stuff we say we're fighting for, we pay no mind to. like that. Like, I'm not pretending that Clint Eastwood is that meta. Right. He's too old to be meta. That's something
Clint,
like.
Should we continue editing? I think there's some better. No, tell me. No.
I love the fact that this movie is called American Sniper, because it takes this title that is so. It sounds so raw and broad and generalized, but like perfect, because.
Yeah.
It's dehumanizing, for the sake of being principled.
Yeah.
And for standing for something.
Yeah. I want to go back to the filmmaking for a second. because I think it's an interesting sort of window onto that, and I wish I hadn't said that, because what I think Clint Eastwood is best at, and maybe this plays into why he isn't as celebrated as some of his contemporaries. There is artistry, and there is value, and there is complexity in allowing a story to tell itself, not swaying it one way or the other. Because what that does is, and I think if we can talk about the propaganda for a second, both sides, the reason that both sides are seeing this as like a cause celeb, the reason that it is, as you put it, that it is tapping into the zeitgeist in a way that I don't think anyone expected it to, is because allowing a movie or allowing the camera just to sit there and chronicle, and yet it is never a documentary. It is always a fiction movie.
Right.
You know, allowing that to happen, what that allows is it allows it to, among other things, be whatever you bring into the movie with you.
Yeah.
You know?
I can't think of a movie that has done that as well as this since Dead Man Walking, which came out in 1995.
Well said.
And I went to see that movie with a dear friend of mine, Sarah. We were in high school. She was, and I would imagine still is, staunchly anti-death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
I was staunchly pro-death penalty. I have since disavowed this, and I am 100% in every way against the death penalty. I don't.
Sure.
I'm just so against it, I can't even fathom that I was for it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you just like randomly killed people, right? Like you were like back then, you were just like randomly killing people, just to.
I wouldn't call it random. I had a plan.
No, it's fair.
I mean,
right. It's a penalty.
They all deserved it.
Fair. Okay.
It's very.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Just fact checking.
I thought that killing people who killed people to show that killing people was wrong made perfect sense back in the day.
Sure.
And we could talk about that some other time, but my point is we went and saw Dead Man Walking together, and we're both moved extremely and sobbing and broken. And we walked out of that movie, and she was like, and that's why the death penalty was bad. And I was like, and that's why you kill people who kill people. Like, it happened.
Right.
Like, it worked. And
right.
and I want to give Tim Robbins immense amounts of credit for that, because I know Tim Robbins is totally anti-death penalty and very liberal and all that stuff.
Yep.
But I do feel like he was able to walk that to show the depth of what capital punishment does, while not saying, and if you're for it, you're a bad person.
Yeah. Yes.
And I would say the same thing about this movie. I think this shows the depth of what war does to a person. And if this is not as artfully made of a film, I get that. But this shows the depth of this shows the depth of I think what war does to a person, and the celebration of war, and our idea of heroizing soldiers, what it does to our humanity. I think it shows that in a way that I can't think of a movie doing that I'm sure there are movies out there that have done it, Andy. I just can't think of them.
Sure.
And so I think it's a beautiful thing that Clint Eastwood has chosen, and Bradley Cooper got together and said, like, let's make this and just put it out there. I don't think they're being tricky. I don't think they're being sneaky.
Right.
They're just telling the story.
I also think, in service of that, I think the fact that Clint Eastwood is very much Clint Eastwood is, to combine words that make no sense together, he is the populist auteur, right? He his artistry is by making a movie that looks like other movies, and I don't mean that as like a Woody Allen movie doesn't look like other movies. He does not deserve to breathe the same air as these directors we've been talking about. But Baz Luhrmann does not make a movie that looks like anyone else's movie.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Clint Eastwood, I mean, if I didn't know he directed Unforgiven, I wouldn't necessarily assume he directed it. None of those I can't think of a movie. I can't think of a Clint Eastwood style.
That's the exact number they pin on Ron Howard. That's exactly the thing.
That's right. That's right. The other thing that it allows, that fact allows for in this movie is Bradley Cooper to do the same thing with his acting. You know, and I think that's where you get, you know, he sees it in black and white, but the performance is gray. You know, I think that's where you get that, and I think there's just something so beautiful about his performance, and you know, of course he wouldn't think that this dude is clearly unhinged at the end. Of course the dude starts out as a cowboy, right? He wants to be a cowboy, right? And again, this is the movie Chris Kyle. This is not the real Chris Kyle. I didn't know the man. I haven't read the book. I don't care to do either, not out of some animus. I'm a busy person. And he's dead, so I can't meet him. Rest in peace. You know, it is people who say that the movie Chris Kyle is unaffected by his experience in war, stopped paying attention halfway through the movie. Yeah. It's just, and yet he comes to these moral quandaries, still trying nobly, I think, movie Chris Kyle, nobly to wrestle with these situations that black and white just don't cover. You know,
I think yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think he manages to always keep this character manages always to keep his principles at the front of things.
Yes.
But he also manages to do things that maybe aren't that, but he's able to think of them as that. So,
yes.
Yes. Going door to door with the other people is not his job.
No.
And he can say, well, I can be better of service this way. And I think he even thinks it. But
right.
Part of it's just he needs to be in the middle of everything because that's how his mindset is.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, of course, the final climactic sniper shot. Like, dude, that was a terrible idea. You shouldn't have done that. But it's like, but he was like, but I'm doing the thing I came here to do.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
yeah.
And I would say, I think the only thing I would say is I think it matches actually. I think Clint Eastwood does not have a directing style in terms of a visual style or a musical, but I would say, well, there might be a musical style. I think he goes for musical sparsity. I think that he is attracted towards telling stories with the least amount of words possible, and with the most amount of like. I think the less said, the better, and for him, is how I think he feels. And I think he's attracted to characters that have a deep interior life that don't necessarily articulate what they're thinking, who act. I think he's attracted to competence. I think competence, like the portrayal of competence, is actually something that is important to him.
Sure.
I don't know what that means. What'd you do with that information?
Well, I think
he's attracted to sad stories. I think he's attracted.
That's absolutely true.
I think he's attracted to tragedy in a very interesting This is what's interesting to me, in a non-sensationalistic way.
He's the and I want you to know that this is, I mean, in its own way, this is the biggest compliment I could possibly give him. If the play Our Town were a director, that director would be Clint Eastwood. Because,
that's fascinating.
Because it is, and I love everything you just said, and it fits right in. It is not sensationalistic. It is, there is not one word of that play that is not saying 10 more words underneath the surface.
Right.
The entire third
Yep.
act of that play is about how we don't say the things what we should say, and it's about how maybe it's better that we don't say this thing, quote unquote, we should say certain things. Maybe it's better that we don't. For those of you who have not read Our Town since middle school, it's much better when you're an adult. I don't know why they make you read it that early. When Emily goes back, spoilers, when Emily is dead and she goes back, and everyone tells her, choose the least important day you can, right? Choose the least important day. Why is that? Because every moment is so full of everything. Beauty and sadness and joy and life and all of that stuff that we literally can't handle it. And so maybe the people, and this is bad news for you and me, Phil, maybe the people who don't say much, maybe they're the ones handling it the right way, because you know what?
Yeah.
Because if I start, I'll never stop. Because if I start, I will never stop. And I think Clint Eastwood, and I think there's something, and there is something, clearly the character who does this in Our Town is Emily, a female. There's something to the fact that unless I'm forgetting something, all of Clint Eastwood's characters who sort of embody this most fully are male. But I also don't find that all that surprising, because of the era in Hollywood he came up in, the genres he played in the most. I mean, the fact that he's a dude, if you're gonna direct westerns and you're going to direct war films set not right now, and even right now there are more men than women, except for $1 Million Baby. But
I was waiting. I didn't want to interrupt you, but
sure.
yes.
But what is that? That is a woman who is exploring what is traditionally a masculine pursuit. Yeah.
But it's interesting because the thing that they connect on in $1 Million Baby is that they put the action ahead of words.
Yes.
And that when he finally tells her what that word in Gaelic means.
Yeah, Mokushla, whatever it is. Yeah. Yes.
It's already
It doesn't, right.
I'm gonna cry. I can't.
I know.
It's already happened.
Yes.
And I mean, it's like it's beside the point almost.
Yes.
That's the beautiful thing. There's a scene in this movie I want to talk about, and then I don't have a lot more to say. I guess maybe if we'd done the show like the moment after I saw it, I might have just. Of course, I also might have just verbal diarrhea all over the place. But I'm really. Can you hear my child yelling in the background? By the way, can you hear it?
I can't.
Great. Well, let's keep going then. She sits, when she wakes up from her nap, she sits on her bed and screams until someone comes and get her, which is dumb because it's not like there's lava on the floor. She could.
We don't lock her in. You don't know that. You don't know there's not lava.
Maybe my showing up there is what makes the lava go away.
That's right.
I don't know.
That's
4-year-old.
Right. You are. It's the dancing baby Groot. Like as soon as you look, whoop. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What I think in essence, like there's why I know he's still got it. Aside from just, by the way, the fact that the action sequences were really well done.
Oh, so well done.
And that the acting was great. And I'm going to say this very quickly. It frustrates me when people will say, "Oh, well, they'll poo-poo his directing, they'll critique that and say it's lazy," and they'll be, "Oh, but the performances are great." And I'm like,
that drove me.
Wait a minute. Well, it's like, well, who helped those people into those performances?
Yes.
Like, it's not a coincidence that he quite often gets phenomenal performance. Now he casts well.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm not, and he still is. Apparently, Bradley Cooper was like bulking up for the role, and Clint was like, you don't need to gain any weight. And Bradley Cooper was like, no, Clint, I'm gonna gain the weight. And Clint was like, I mean, I guess if that's what you want to do. So I mean, there is that sort of like 82-year-old like, come on, let's make a movie thing. But
right.
If you ever think about his on-set demeanor and the way he runs things, it is, I don't know. He refuses to say action or cut. I don't know if you knew that.
I think you told me that at some point.
It's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite. He gets the scene set up. First of all, it's a rule. Everyone's quiet on the set. I mean, always, not just during when they say quiet on the set. I mean, it's a very quiet set. Mm-hmm. People are not supposed to talk on set except for like at normal volume. You talk at normal volume in conversation. Mm-hmm. He'll be talking with the actors, and then he'll just keep talking, and then he'll kind of fade back behind the camera, and then just kind of when they want to start, they start.
Yeah.
And when it's over, he doesn't say cut. He just waits a little bit, and then he's like, "Okay, great." Like, that's it. There's no, and he works with people who get it. And apparently, everyone who works with him just says like that the culture he creates on set. So I want to say that and just be like, we can't say Bradley Cooper's performance was amazing, but the director didn't do a good job. It's
that
like
drives me crazy. Drives me crazy.
The other thing to say.
Wait, hold up. Just real quick, just to provide context for people listening to this. We're both actors, right? We're not giving up any credit willingly, at all.
Sure.
At all.
I'm an actor who very rarely worked with a good director, so I mean, I would have killed to have worked with a good director. I would have loved to have known what it was like to actually be directed.
Sure. Okay. So I think it is a long running fallacy which is not to say that good directors can't get stuff out of bad actors and great actors can't outperform their directors, but to not acknowledge that there is a symbiosis there is just extraordinarily short-sighted. That's it.
And it's a strength and a weakness for different people.
Yes.
I mean,
sure.
Sometimes great directors don't necessarily know how to pull performances out of people, but they're great in other aspects of what they do. I mean, it's a tricky road. But anyhow, there is we want to talk about, does Clint Eastwood have a style? Okay. Sitting around the table, all the troops are sitting around the table in the man's house that they've commandeered his house in Iraq. Mm-hmm. They've stayed with the guy overnight now, and the guy invites them to dinner and come have dinner, we'll cook for you. Seems there's no problem. And then Chris Kyle's character sees the guy's elbows and how they're like bruised, basically, or like he's a guy who's been in combat in some way, but he just sees the guy's elbows.
Yeah. Yes.
Like he's been a sniper or something.
Yeah.
But he's not the sniper.
Right.
But I guess his elbows have been worn.
They're like smooth or something. Yes.
Sees them, and see, the thing is, neither of us can even pinpoint it, but he sees them and he goes, that he knows exactly what it means, and he goes and he searches the guy's house, and of course it finds out all blah 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 blah, finds out that the guy's got all these, that he's part of the resistance, all the guns.
Yeah.
It's never explained. He doesn't tell anyone why.
Right.
They don't show a scene that goes, and the thing I knew was, or even pulls back his shirt and goes, see, none of that happened.
Right.
No, but we laugh, but that's so much movie making today.
Yes.
And Eastwood just doesn't go for it.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of little things like that I love about him. So anyways, American Sniper, I worry about America, as an American. I worry about the fact that the way we see ourselves in this world, I don't know that we know a way out of it. And because I want it to be true that we're the greatest country in the history of the world, and I want it to be true that we'll last forever, watching us fall apart over the way that we choose to be in this world. Violent heroes who say that we don't like violence, and yet don't seem to know another way around it.
Yeah.
And I say none of this, with even an iota of disrespect for our soldiers, for people who choose to stand up, who choose to forfeit their lives. Because whether they live or die on the field, whether they live and survive or not, the very fact that they've chosen to do this kind of living is an act of sacrifice that most people can't comprehend.
Certainly not. I cannot comprehend it. And yes, well said.
So you and I don't, and there's no disrespect meant for for soldiers or for the people. My father was a veteran. Both my grandparents or grandfathers were. I no disrespect in any way for that. But the reality is, nevertheless, there is a lack of respect in our refusal to acknowledge when something's broken.
Yeah.
And when the thing that's broken wastes and crushes and mutilates and twists and distorts the lives of so many young men and women. People, it turns out, aren't made to kill people. What I love about this movie is it says, let's take the guy who's the best at it, who was born to do it.
Yeah.
And who, in that way, represents the nobility of the American desire to protect and to serve the world and its own people. And let's show the truth. Because the reality is, even though it is a character of Chris Kyle, it's based on his book, and he may have been, we know from news stories and from his own story how warped and distorted his life became in pursuit of that idealism. And this movie shows that, and it shows it respectfully because Clint Eastwood does respect and love America. And for me, I'm more liable to listen to someone who loves America in a real way, whose love for America is unquestioned.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'm more interested in hearing his critique of American culture.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact he loves this country.
Right.
And so for me, his critique has teeth.
Yeah.
So this movie is in that sense beautiful, and that's kind of all I wanted to say about that.
I have one. I think everything you've just said is lovely, and I agree with all of it. I want to say one thing to wrap up, and that is this: one of the long-standing disagreements, points of contention that you and I have is, does it matter if a movie based on real events is true to those events? And you come down on the side of it needs to be a fairly accurate representation. And
I do, yes.
And I come down on the side that no, it doesn't. And the movie that we have tangled the most over this is The Social Network. Where Aaron Sorkin was like, I'm not his rabbi, which whenever you think about Aaron Sorkin, is kind of an amazing line. I respectfully and I humbly submit this movie as making my point. I'm not saying I win the day. I'm saying the reason that I don't want to talk about Chris Kyle the human, why I want to talk about Chris Kyle the character, the reason I don't care for purposes of this movie to read the book first, right, is because what fiction can do is seek truth in ways that nonfiction cannot. It doesn't make them better. It's not a better way of seeking truth. It's just a different way of seeking truth. And this is, if Chris Kyle was a racist scumbag who was insane, and who cares? Because for this movie, it doesn't change the point that Clint Eastwood is trying to make.
Andy?
Phil?
Hoisted by my own petard. There's a lot there. I think you just started a second podcast, and I'm not going to do it right now.
No.
And I would say, I think that there's a really good article in Grantland in the past week that you and I were talking about beforehand that I want to mention in this podcast.
Yeah.
About both Selma and American Sniper, and how both of them, and there's a really good article on Selma that you mentioned. I think they should be looked at for the sake of this conversation. So people who are interested in this sort of idea, I think, look at that.
Yeah.
I think that it makes sense. I think you need to, for the sake of telling a story, sometimes need to tweak things. I don't think that I think what you tweak matters and how you tweak it matters.
Total
And I think
agreement.
if you're tweaking it to make your own point rather than to make the point of something that I don't see, for instance, the filmmaker of Selma tweaking the matters to make her own point that wouldn't otherwise be true. I think she's tweaking it to try to figure out how to make the truth more, like to make this particular truth more clear.
Throw it into sharper relief. And
I would say the same thing about Clint Eastwood. At least I would think I would say that. But I don't see. Yeah. Okay. But it might just be that I hate Aaron Sorkin.
Sure.
And this could be a continuing conversation.
My only response to that, because I think that's really well said, and I agree with you. It's funny because this is absolutely the biggest disagreement we've had on this podcast, and we are in agreement on like 98% of it. We're like chimpanzee and human DNA here, and yet look where we end up. I'm the chimp. The only thing I'll say, and it's not a great point, but I like the turn of phrase or to hear myself talk. So you say like they're not doing it to further their own point of view, and my response would be, of course they are. I mean, I know. Of course they are.
All I will say, Andy, in bluegrass, bluegrass music works because you got 4 or 5 guys in a band, everybody gets a solo, and they have to be virtuosic, and they have to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But the beautiful thing is how good they are in a real, true, traditional bluegrass band, how good they are must be subservient to the melody that they're given and the overall drive of the music that's being played. So their solo matters, and they get a chance to have a voice. They are not machines, and they're not slaves to...
Right.
Like, it's not you must play exactly this note.
Sure.
But they are slaves to some degree to the beat and to the melody.
Mm-hmm.
And but within that, they are willing and able to have their own voice. My big concern comes and then I guess it's a fine line.
Yeah.
When your own voice becomes more important to you.
Sure.
Subservience to the truth.
Sure. Again, 98%. 98% agreement.
Michael Moore, Bill O'Reilly, Ann Coulter, Sarah Palin, and Bill Maher, I think to some degree in a different way.
Sure.
Most
of these, thankfully, not filmmakers. Most of these people think.
And Aaron and this is where I would put Aaron Sorkin. I mean, this is where I think he fits, and this is where I disagree with a lot of people. Is because he's so talented, he gets away with the fact that basically he's decided the world is a certain way, and he will tell that story regardless.
Sure.
The facts.
Sure.
So that's another story for another time. I don't mean to end it on that note. I am interested in how this movie is using the template of a basic biography that probably was meant to be pro something and using it very unironically and very respectfully, putting it out there in such a way that it can very easily be seen as a very helpful and thoughtful critique of American culture. I don't think it's disrespectful of Chris Kyle or his legacy.
Right.
But I also don't think that it lionizes him, even the way it purports to lionize him. I don't even know how to describe it. Very strange.
It's not a rubber stamp. It is the
very few movies.
The things about this movie that are bad are really, really bad, but the things about this movie that are good are towering achievements. Truly.
Thank you for and I just want to say I want to turn it away from you and say to the audience, when I first came out of this movie, I wanted to talk about it immediately, and Andy was sort of like, I don't really have much to say, but if you want to talk about it, we can. So, one, Andy, thank you for humoring me.
I found I had more to say.
Have a conversation. I wanted to have it public.
Sure.
And I wanted to have it with you, obviously. Who else do I want to talk about anything with?
Honestly.
And two, you had a lot to say, and I'm really grateful for you and your thought process, so thank you.
I am really grateful for you suggesting it, because I would not have suggested, as you know, I would not have suggested this podcast. Are we done? I think we're done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, go see American Sniper. Don't expect to love 100% of it, whatever your political leanings. Go see it without any political leanings. See Layer Cake. All of you. All of you should see Layer Cake. Layer Cake. That's close enough. Yeah, there it is. Layer Cake. And you know what, Phil? It's getting into Oscar season. We're probably going to have a top movies of 2014 thing coming out now. We're going to... Why not do another live chat at the Oscars, because that's a horror show every single time. So lots of fun stuff coming up, and we're excited to have you along for the ride. For Phil Duvall, I am Andy Roth. We are Second Breakfast Podcast. We'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
The most important meal of the day, second